Sherry, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, so
No, I'm not hearing. Can you hear me?
yes.
Let
me turn it down.
Sounds good.
Here.
President-elect.
Here.
Here.
Okay, ask her. The owls.
I'm here. I can't hear the meeting, but I'm here. Can you hear me?
And, okay, so that's coming through. Let's switch back to the owl.
You can hear us now, right?
Right here.
Thumbs up if you can hear us?
I'm talking.
Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can I get a thumbs up? Can you hear me? Okay, we're gonna actually have a meeting tonight. All right. So we did our roll call attendance, Madam Clerk. We do it again? Should we do it one more time just for fun? Let's do it again. Director Ray. Director Kelly.
Aye.
And Director Kingman.
Here.
President Levesque. Here. Director Nat.
Here.
Student Advisor Levon. Here. Superintendent Sweetie. Here. That works so much better with audio. Thank you. We have a quorum. Next, we'll have our approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Madam Clerk. Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp.
Aye.
And our agenda is adopted. Next up is the best part of our agenda tonight is the swearing in of our new student advisor. And this will be done by Dr. Sweetie.
Well, I'm very pleased tonight to be able to bring on board a new student advisor to join Mariska. And we're going to do a sworn oath of office. And so as we're ready, okay, there you can look at that or raise your right hand. I, Nathan Nichols, do solemnly swear
I, Nathan Nichols, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the provisions of the charter and ordinances of Snohomish County,
and the provision of the charter and ordinances of Snohomish County,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge the duties of
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge the duties of
the office of student advisor to the Board of Directors of Arlington Public Schools according to law, to the best of my ability.
the office of student advisor to the Board of Directors, Arlington Public Schools, according to law, to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard. For the next 2 years.
Welcome.
You can come down.
No, honestly.
It's a good spot. Okay, all right. Welcome, Nathan, and thank you, family, for being here. We're excited to get to work with you and learn from you and your perspective. Thank you for agreeing to join us. Would you like to say anything? No? Okay. All right, next up on the agenda is our regular meeting minutes from July 10th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move that we approve the minutes as presented from July 10th, 2023.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the regular meeting minutes as presented from July 10th. Madam Clerk. Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Next part of our agenda is our public comment portion. Do we have anyone signed up? We do not. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to the board tonight? All right. Next up on our agenda is our public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing regarding the adoption of the 2023-24 annual budget. I'd like to introduce Gina Zutenhorst, our Executive Director of Financial Services.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm here for the second reading of the operating budget for the fiscal year 23-24 and the proposal thereof. I'll just jump right in. Whenever we are talking about. I'm not getting it to. There we go. So anytime that we're talking about our budget, we are always first and foremost bringing it back to the mission of the district. And that we are doing vision aligned budgeting. And our primary mission is to educate, prepare, and inspire students to graduate and seek their full potential as lifelong learners. Amongst the goals of the strategic plan, resource stewardship is the area of focus for goal 3. And that's that we will secure quality resources, people, time, money, and property to align these resources to support equitable learning and achievement for students by making decisions using an equity lens and data. And also, we always are looking at our values that guide budget decisions. There's a number of them there, various priorities that we have to keep in mind and keep in balance. And this is something that the board had developed. It's part of board policy. And we are always revisiting this as part of our presentation. So the board has seen this slide many, many times, but I'm also putting things in here that our public would benefit from if they're just tuning in for the first time. The budget is a very long document, and it is known as the F-195. This is the required format that OSPI, the state, requires school districts all across the state, all 290 some of us, to present our budgets in this form. So because it is such a long document, very complicated, 200 plus pages, what I have for you in our presentation is a summary of that. Our budget includes 5 major funds, and general operating fund is the primary one. That's where all of the operating costs of the district, all the day-to-day activities happen there. That is the primary substance of our budget. And the other funds I will speak of also and share summaries on those. But we'll go ahead and dive into the general fund as the summary in a little bit more detail. So within that F-195 document, you'll be able to see this data as well in some of the very early pages of it before it starts diving into a ton more detail. So as you can see, this is the comparative between prior year's budget and the new year's proposed budget. And the revenues being 96.7 million is the estimate that we have. The expenditures being 99.3 million is the estimate that we have. And then that puts us with an ending fund balance of 3.3 million. Talking about our staff counts, you can see comparison to prior years. And it's very evident at this place, some of the reductions that we have had to undertake as part of the development of this present budget.
The ending budget for 23 doesn't match the beginning budget of 24.
And that is because usually we do not fully expend the whole capacity of our expenditures in any given year. So it usually does not end up being the bottom line number that is there. So we have taken an estimate of where we think it will be ending and started that as the beginning fund balance. And that has been a question throughout, and that we have visited the answer to that. But yes, thanks for pointing that out. Then we talked about the staff counts. The enrollment, we have utilized the enrollment that our board approved in our January board meeting, and that is the basis that we undertake our budget development and our staffing progress. And you can see that we did approve just slightly less for our budgeted enrollment of students, full-time equivalent of students, a little bit less than we had prior year. Largely that is because of our kindergarten numbers and that not being reliable to know what they're gonna come in as. And that during this COVID and post-COVID era, that our kindergarten numbers have been less, and that's been a trend throughout the state of Washington. So we are being conservative to wait and see what our student enrollment actually comes in at, especially in the kindergarten area. So some of the key points, our estimated beginning fund balance is 6.2. So we talked about that. And then our estimated ending fund balance is 3.3. So this is a place that is makes us feel a little bit precarious. And so we are still seeking reductions in our costs or increases in revenue, which would also assist us. Potentially that could happen in enrollment. But otherwise, across the system, we're looking for an additional 650,000 in order to hit a target ending fund balance of closer to 4 million. Current year spending will need to remain very narrow. And future years, we're going to need to do some further reductions in order to maintain a balanced budget and to rebuild our fund balance to a more comfortable level. So our work is not done. We did a lot of adjusting, a lot of work was put into making the adjusting entries to the budget that we need to make. But we're not done. We're not business as usual for this coming year. We're still going to have to be very narrow in our spending decisions. Part of the budget is that it also lists out exactly what our general fund levy for the local property taxes and our capital fund levy are going to be. So that is part of the budget process. It's listed in the budget. And it is also part of the budget resolution that you'll see later in our meeting for proposal for adoption. Because then I am also have the authority then to go ahead and certify that to the Snohomish County Treasurer's Office or the Auditor's Office for the tax rolls for the coming year. So we're going to dive in a little bit more to the revenues and expenditures for general fund. The budgeted revenues for the district, there's a pie chart and it shows how it's broken out, the main areas of funding. The dollar amounts are here as well. So a $96.7 million revenue budget is broken out. 62% comes from the state general purpose. And then 19% comes for state special purpose programs. That would be special education, transportation, those areas. But those areas combined, the money from the state is about 81% of our district programs. So our main primary funding comes from the state. Local taxes support 11%, and then federal dollars and local non-tax, which would be tuition and fees or food services funds for paid meals, donations from local PTAs and things like that. And then the federal dollars is 4%. So there are the dollar amounts. And I'll also point out that other revenues is a large dollar amount, 6.7 million, and 5 million of that is related to some governmental accounting standards boards requirements. The most recent one that was implemented last year was for lease entries, lease accounting, leases. And another new one that they have that we have to implement is subscription-based information technology agreements, or SPIDA, which is a really great acronym for such a thing. But I want to stress to you that those are book entries only. They do not actually represent revenue. And on the other side, you'll see on the expense side, we have budgeted the same amount. So it is a wash, revenue and expenditure. They're all book entries. And we have talked about that a couple of times. So general fund expenditures. And so this is a breakout, a pie chart that shows how the district spends by program the general fund expenditures. And here is the dollar amount side, 99.3 million in a comparative. So
You can see that regular instruction, basic education makes up 55% of our total budgeted expenditures. Special education, it makes up 16% of our total expenditures. Then another big one is support services. That makes up 18% of our total expenditures. That includes our transportation department, our food and nutrition services department, and all of the district-wide support functions such as custodial services, maintenance, grounds, human resources, business office, all of those kinds of things are district-wide support role, and that is called support services programs. And then there's a number of other smaller pie chart pieces, and those represent individualized special programs that the district operates, such as the career and technical education instruction and other little categorical programs where we might be receiving state or federal grants. And they have very specific criteria on how those are operated and run. Here's the dollar amounts of the budgeted expenditures, doing the comparative between the 2 years. And we'll move into another way of looking at the expenditures. These are state defined coding. So the way that we looked at before was by program. That's state defined. They tell all school districts exactly which program is what and what costs are to be coded there. Another way of that they dictate that coding is by activity. And so this is the looking at that same dollar amount, 99.3 million. See 99.3 million bottom line there. And then 99.3 million, same thing. So this is by activity. We have teaching and support, school administration, central administration, and then other support activities. And so also to clarify that school administration and central administration, that includes all facets of that. That's not just like for school administration. That's not just the salaries of principals and assistant principals. That includes everything that would be in the front offices of the schools, like the registrars and secretarial and the copiers and all of the equipment that is utilized in the front office as well. So that gives you an idea of how that is broken. And then the last one that I'll share with you as far as expenditure breakout, state defined, it's called by object. So it shows you certificated salaries, which means those that have a teaching certificate, instruct or classified salaries, everyone that does not have a teaching certificate, all of the employee benefits that go along with salaries as a whole. So retirement costs, Social Security, Medicare, health benefits, things like that, supplies and materials, and then purchase services, travel, which is a very minuscule part of our budget, and then capital outlay. And again, that's where you can see the 5 million that is budgeted for those GASB accounting book entries, the lease accounting and the SPITA accounting. This is a slide just to briefly demonstrate something that's called out in the WAC law that schools need to include in their budget presentations. It's an example of how specific they really can get on schools and the type of accounting and reporting that we do. They have us present what our budgeted numbers are for materials, supplies, and other costs being purchase services and travel and that kind of thing. And then they have us compare that to what the allocation is supposedly from the state for those items, but only for certain programs. And what this is basically telling you is that the state allocation for our district is going to be about 7.2 million. And the budgeted expenditures in that same area is going to be about 7.5 million. So our budgeted costs are greater than what the state allocation is. A representation of a 4-year forecast for us, for the district. This is a somewhat new requirement. About 4 or 5 years ago, this became a requirement. that districts go ahead and illustrate and show their 4-year forecast for budgeted revenues and expenditures and ending fund balance. So this is our 4-year forecast. And it's notable that our fund balance is positive, but that we're still targeting for future reductions and cost containment as being essential to the financial health of the district. Increased revenues will certainly help us, but we're going to need to be working towards rebuilding fund balance. And we need to continue identifying those reductions and refine as the year goes on. This projection assumes that we have renewed our 4-year educational programs operations levy. And it assumes that it is at about 3 to 4 million more than what is currently levied. That's still with maintaining an even tax rate because of assessed valuation being so high. I'll pause for a moment before we move into the other funds. Are there any thoughts or questions for the moment? I know that the board has been involved in this quite along the way.
I have a question back on materials, supplies and other costs. So the difference that we have, that 274,000, I'm just trying to make sure that I got this straight. So the allocation is what the state fund is giving us and that's what they're covering?
That's right.
Okay, and then we're a little bit over that. So is that where, I think I had seen somewhere that parents needed to buy a few supplies for their kids. Is that where that 274 is coming from, where they have to make up for that?
It's, you're on the right track with
Okay.
your thinking. If the state does not provide the funding for that
Mhm.
enough,
Mhm.
it has to come from somewhere.
Okay.
So it's, the other sources would be levy,
Mhm.
local donations or, and also with the school supplies, we reduced our budget. So parents are bringing those supplies for students.
Right.
So those aren't even included in that number.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Question. Thank you. So ASB, I'll go ahead and jump in. This fund is to support student activities and athletics. It's not to be operated by itself though, because general fund also supports some of the activities that happen or that would also be considered athletics and activities. But this is the part that is the Associated Student Body Fund. And a primary premise to ASB funds is that they are student governed and that students are involved in the design of the budget and that student approval is required for the use of the ASB funds. The revenues come primarily from student body fees, activity gate receipts, fundraising, and donations. Our debt service fund. This fund is used solely for principal and interest payments on outstanding debt. So the state of Washington, school districts, we are required to account for our long-term debt in this fund. Transfers in are to make payments on non-voted debt. So revenues and transfers in is the primary source for this fund at this juncture. Most of that is all transfers in from other funds. We do not have any voted bonds outstanding. We have some non-voted smaller debt issues that were issued for bus debt and also for front funding of capital projects for payment on financing the levy projects that were done. So the voters approved the capital levy, but those levy payments come in over the course of 4 years. And in the meantime, non-voted debt is issued in order to be able to do the projects that we need to undertake. So that is the debt service fund. And I will talk about our capital projects fund, and this fund administers long-term school construction and repair needs. And the resources that are in this fund cannot be spent on regular school operations. This is our summary for the capital projects. We estimate we'll be starting with about 5.9 million. The revenues and other sources will be about 6.7. We expect to be spending about 10.9 million. That includes transfers out, because a big part of the cost is going ahead to service the bonded debt that was issued. So the funds have to be transferred to the debt service fund, and then the debt service fund takes care of the principal and interest. There is a smaller item that is a little bit newer for our school district this coming year. There's a small transfer of about 21,000 coming out of the capital projects fund, and it's going to the general fund. And this is a unique RCW that was covers this, that when you have certain projects that are undertaken by the capital projects fund, and they result in some ongoing costs, like some of the camera and security systems that were installed. The first year of the maintenance agreements on those is allowable to be paid for directly out of the capital projects fund. But future years of it cannot be paid out of the capital projects fund. It has to be transferred to general fund, and then general fund pays the bill. So it is a unique requirement, but nonetheless, it's there and it's appropriately supported by our CW. That's how it's supposed to go. Okay, and the main projects are President Elementary roof and building upgrades, Pioneer Elementary roof and building upgrades will be undertaken this next coming year. And there's a little bit more than that, but those are the primary substance of what would be going on. Transportation vehicle fund is our last fund to go over today. This is for the purchase of buses. That's the only thing that we can do is purchase buses, and for a major repair of buses. For our situation, we're not usually doing a major repair of a bus. We are purchasing outright new buses to replace the aging fleet. The main sources of funds include state depreciation schedule monies. The state gives a certain amount each year as the bus fleet depreciates in value. And this is what's supposed to help be able to replace those aging buses. We have about 1.6 million in capacity budgeted to support purchase of additional buses. But 116,000 is for transfer to the debt service fund for repayment of principal and interest that is due on about the 1.2 million original issue non-voted bonds from back in 2017-18. I think that's kind of hard to follow, but it's perfectly documented and we've got it down on that schedule to make sure we're meeting our obligations. So that is coming to the end of the summary for the budget for the next fiscal year. We do this in a public hearing. We advertised in the newspaper of general circulation 2 weeks prior to twice that this was happening. And that's by law as well, very specific. And then our budget has to be adopted by August 31st. And after the adoption by the board, the budget is submitted to OSPI. And they take that on and do their approvals and make it official. Is there any other further questions?
Director Knapp, Director Kelly, do you have any questions from Zoom? No?
Questions for me? Thank you. Excellent report. Thank you, Gina.
Is there a line item in there that you're most concerned with?
I don't think so. Not one in particular. I think it's just continuing to shift a very complex system to lesser spending. And we talked about that, how very long it really takes to make that shift. So we've taken great strides this year, but we're not done. And it will be very difficult to find how we will do that. It will become a little bit more felt and more painful. I think some of what was done this year, to some extent, was a realignment. To some extent, it was perhaps giving up budget that perhaps hadn't been spent anyway. So people gave capacity. If we go further, it's gonna really additionally impact things we can or can't do. That's a summary.
Thank you.
Do our student advisors have any questions?
If I have any more, no, good presentation, very informative, thank you.
Thanks for listening.
All right, so this is the part where I get to ask our audience, whether on Zoom or in person, I get to ask 3 times for public comment, so. Are there any questions or comments from audience members regarding this topic? Are there any questions or comments from audience members regarding this topic? Terry, would you like to ask a question? Do you have a comment?
On the school supplies, because you didn't do the school supplies this year, how much does it cost to do a year of school supplies? And those school supplies, what do you budget?
Shall I say it again so that we can really hear it? Okay. The question was about school supplies and how the district used to provide those school supplies that families would have perhaps typically provided themselves personally. The district provided that and it was part of our budget. How much was that? Because that was a change that we made, a budget reduction. $87,000 was allotted for school supplies. I think I have that right in my mind, that is the amount amongst all elementaries, middle and high school.
Great question. We also have another opportunity to ask some more questions. Are there any questions or comments from audience members regarding this topic? Yes, I forgot your name.
Alex.
Alex, please ask your question.
Does the board get any additional briefings other than the school board meetings on the budget? And before the votes happen?
Great
Yes, so
question.
the question is, the boards, do they get any more briefings on the budget before, you know, or kind of what is the timeline on that for budget briefings? And yes, we do the July one, but we also have briefings as we go, as far as the staffing levels, the enrollment levels, education around how the revenues are generated from enrollment, how the staffing is generated from enrollment, some of those understandings of all the different grant sources and program and coding. So they are very involved in that development along the way. July is the first chance they get to see the actual F-195 document as a draft. Oftentimes that ends up being the same thing that comes in August, just simply based on partially the mammoth amount of effort it is to actually get it into that format, the systems that are involved in that. But they also have almost monthly, I mean, we do where we're at each month, real time for the budget reports that go to the board every month. And then we have oftentimes also included as new business, not just having those as consent agenda. This is where the district is this month, fund balance, cash, all the detail of the program expenditures, but also new business where we talk about that, highlight certain things for them, and then they can ask questions. Also, you know, each month we're talking about what's the legislature doing and what we think they're going to do for how they fund school districts. Are they going to increase the state special education formula? Are they going to increase the regionalization factor? What is the inflationary cost measure that they're going to be using? So there's frequent interaction on that.
Did that answer your question or?
Yes, so just to be clear, this presentation is more for public consumption to let us know. Than like fact finding.
I think it's for both.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is a relatively high level, you know.
One more.
Absolutely.
Sorry, and this is not meant to be insulting.
Thank you.
Is there any third party or somebody outside the school district that audits these numbers?
Budget numbers are not audited, but all of our financials are audited by the state auditor's office every year. We get a federal single audit in addition to a internal controls audit, and they do an accountability audit, legal compliance with rules and regulations, things that they would consider to be high risk. They do that every other year, covering 2 years. And are you guys hearing me? I'm talking to them. But so yeah, there's an extensive audit process every year. They don't necessarily audit the budget, but the budget so I'm speaking, maybe I saw your eyes. So they don't audit the column that's the budget versus the actual column. They are looking at actual number, the actual column.
Regina, you did have to submit the F-195 draft to the ESD in July, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And they look it over, they do some comparatives as well. And so they'll ask questions as well. They'll say, hey, this looks like a big change. Expected or not, what else is happening? So they do generate their own questions from their review.
That answer your question enough?
Yes, thank you.
Any more clarification or anything? Okay, thank you for speaking up. We appreciate all the public comment at our public hearing. Just for good measure, is there any further questions from any audience members, whether on Zoom or in person? All right, hearing no further questions, I declare the public hearing closed. And I want to say thank you for the people that spoke up. And the approval of the 23-24 annual budget is on the agenda tonight for board approval under new business. And so next we'll have our consent agenda. You can stay right there because you're next. But next on our agenda is our consent agenda, which consists of quite a few different things. Do we have anyone that would like to pull anything from the consent agenda, or would we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Madam Clerk.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Knapp.
Aye.
Thank you. The consent agenda is adopted. Thank you for being here. For those of you who are waiting for the consent agenda to be adopted. Next up, we'll have the new business portion of our meeting. And this is where we get to take action. This is next item is our resolution 2308, 2023-24 Arlington School District number 16 annual budget. And this will be presented by Gina Zutenhorst, our Executive Director of Financial Services. Do you want to share any new information? Or do you want to just talk about the resolution?
I think the resolution is really the official board action that adopts the budget. So the budget is spending authority is mostly what is adopted in the resolution. And so if you scroll down, that's where it gets to the meat of the total appropriations for each of the funds. Appropriations meaning spending, expenditure capacity. And it also lists the transfers that we have to make between funds. If we did not include those in the budget, we would have to come to you and do a board resolution for every single one of those. So we know them in advance and they're based on solid, we include them in the budget resolution at the beginning of the year. So this gives the authority to do that, and it also gives the authority for levying to the county to put on the tax rolls as approved by the voters. Those dollar amounts for the general fund, 9.75 million, and the capital fund, 6.6 and some change. And that's basically it.
Does anyone have any questions for Gina on the resolution? I'm seeing shaking of heads. Do we have a motion to approve resolution 2308? Our annual budget for Arlington School District.
I'll make a motion. We approve resolution 2308.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2308, 2023 to 24 Arlington School District number 16 annual budget. Madam Clerk.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Knapp.
Aye.
Thank you. The budget is approved. Thank you, Gina, for your extensive reporting and your patience with all of our many questions.
Thank you.
Next up, we'd like to welcome our Executive Director of Operations, Brian Lewis, who will be sharing the Facility Advisory Committee recommendation. Welcome, Brian. Good evening.
Hello, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Just a moment here and I'll get my presentation started. A pleasure to be here tonight. I'm here to present to you the Facilities Advisory Committee recommendation of the superintendent regarding our district buildings and grounds. We're going to talk about the basis of recommendations and the supporting documents, the recommendation components and options. It's not just one recommendation, it's a range of recommendations of what our next steps are. Before I get started on that, I want to thank the Facilities Advisory Committee membership for participating in this process. We began this last September 22. And the first task before the Facilities Advisory Committee was to create and review an update to the master facilities plan for the district, since we're drawing from that plan for decision making purposes. So it was quite an extensive task. We met every month, sometimes twice a month. Through June, from September through June, September 22 through June 23. So there are a number of community members representing Arlington on the district, on the committee, as well as school board members or staff members, and leadership. And I want to point out the maintenance technicians that provided their expert guidance for us, for the committee. In conjunction with the architectural firm and the consulting firms that we have working with us on this project. So the Facilities Advisory Committee recommendation is based on findings contained in the 2023 Master Facilities Plan. We're going to take a little detour from this presentation and show you where you would find that plan if you so happen to be looking for it. On the district's webpage, under administration and facilities, there's a link titled Master Facilities Plan. And when you click on that link, it takes you to a 507-page document that looks like this. I just wanted to show you that if you were looking at it printed in a book format, I think McGranahan did a really great job of making the style of it more appealing than in our prior master facilities plan. It was a little bit clinical. This is a little more accessible, even though it's 507 pages in length. I also want to take a moment here and expand the table of contents and show you the different chapters. There's 6 different chapters, 6 distinct chapters in the plan.
Can you make it a little,
And
bigger?
including,
can you make the screen?
yeah,
Load up. Thank you.
and including 4 separate appendices. The chapter that we're going to be drawing from primarily tonight is chapter 3, the system repair and replacement projects. Even though we've invested $25 million from the last capital levy, and the district, time does not stand still for our buildings. Many of our buildings are reaching the 20-year mark in terms of their construction, and some are much older than that, particularly Kent Prairie Elementary, Will Creek Elementary, and Howard Middle School is getting there as well. So we've got, and not to say post, and last but not least, definitely post. So we've got some recommendations from the committee, and the basis for those recommendations is information is found in the master facilities process. So I'm going to switch it back to presentation again. So this is from a prior presentation, this slide. I want to point out the highlighted phrase in here, intended uses of the master facilities plan, the guide decision making for facilities related funding allocations and requests. That's one of the reasons we're here tonight, is to begin that discussion at the board level. This is an excerpt from a page included in chapter 3 of the master facilities plan, the systems repair and replacement. I wanted you to see this and point out to you that the totality of the costs involved in completing all the recommendations included in the plan across the time span of 2024 through 2028 is $90 million. So we're not going to be making a recommendation to pursue capital levy funding for $90 million at this point in time. There are 3 options within the capital projects fund levy, and there's a range in there. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail. We'll get there, but this is just an example page that shows the kinds of projects that were identified within the first 4-year period of the time period considered. You can see that we're looking at 21 plus years, because we have many systems that are in fine condition, operating as they're intended to, but that's they're not going to last forever. So we have to be forward thinking and consider when should we look at other systems. For example, here at Eagle Creek, you can see exterior paint. We need to look at repainting Eagle Creek Elementary in the 2032 time period. And then we've got systems that are outside of that first 20-year period, beginning in 2045. So each one of these columns is sorted by a 4-year time period, and there are projects that are considered within each 4-year time period so that they coincide with an election cycle. So as we anticipate a systems replacement in the future, we can time a question to voters for funding or find another source of funding to accomplish those systems replacements. So I want to pause here and just check, see if anybody has any questions about this page. Okay. So beginning the recommendation. The recommendation has 3 parts to it. The first part is submit a ballot question to voters requesting funding to replace Post Middle School. And you'll see later in the slideshow here tonight that we'll be bringing you more information about that potential cost to replace Post Middle School. Last time we went to voters asking them for support on this, the projected cost was $85 million. Obviously, time has elapsed since then, and there is an increase in costs associated with that. The committee felt strongly enough that post is something that merits being placed in terms of its ability to support educational services and delivery up in that building. Yes, sir.
Is that in addition to the 90 million district wide over the next several years?
Yes, that is.
Wow.
So the numbers are overwhelming in terms of cost. But it's better for us to be honest with ourselves. We're not necessarily going to ask for another $90 million, as I stated earlier, but we need to be aware that we've got costs associated with building or maintaining our buildings to an operating standard that they're undeniable. If we choose to look the other way, we're setting a trap for ourselves in the future.
Brian,
So, yes,
did you say how much it would be now to replace? both
we're
middle schools?
estimating that 90 million for post middle school as well. Because this would be not only a rebuild of the school itself, but also redevelopment of the site to solve other problems that we've got on the site, including traffic safety at Eagle Creek. In the same way, we've got traffic safety issues at Camp Prairie. We have those same issues on the Eagle Creek post SLC campus. If you've been at Eagle Creek during dismissal time, you can see this very clear. So in addition to rebuilding the school, there would also be construction of a new track and field on the site and some bleachers to support the observers during those times.
Brian, I had a quick question about the post middle school site.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was, I'm wondering if we were to have funding for a new building for the middle school, could we possibly consider anything with renovating the existing post middle school to house SVLC and or Weston? Would that, could we look at that as exploring, is that building at all feasible, or does that part of it need to be demoed in order to then rebuild a new middle school?
So if we demolish post middle school, then we become eligible for $5 million in a state match for that demolition. Right? And that would be there's a category called new and lieu. And what that means is that instead of repairing the building that we've got or modernizing the building, we just replace it with a new building. So that would reduce the potential cost of a bond issue to our owners. But there is another component to this that let's just put a timeline out there. If we were to pass a bond in February, then we're looking at least 3 years before we could move into a new school building that would replace post. Because we've got 1.5 years of design and then another 1.5 years of construction following that. And when I say design, I mean permitting as well. And there's architectural, engineering, grounds, a whole range of consulting work that needs to be done before we can even start breaking ground or apply for a permit.
So Brian, on that note, another quick question to dovetail on that. So if the voters were to pass a bond, the bond starts kicking in, even though we're talking about students not being in a building for 3 years.
Yes, it does. So what we have some management options available to us in terms of the timing of the sale of bonds. And there's that why we employ a bond consultant to help us understand how are we going to get the greatest effect for the lowest cost. And consideration of timing for bond issuance is part of that. There's also federal rules about how long we have to spend the proceeds of a bond after we sell it. And we have to spend 80% of the proceeds of the bond within the 3 years of issuance. Otherwise, believe it or not, there may be some tax ramifications involved in that, which we don't want that. So a bond of this size, we would generally stage it in multiple sales. And we could do half and half or 30-40 or 30-70, depending on what the cash flow needs are for the project. So a lot of that money up front is on design work. And so it may be that we don't need as much at the beginning than we do at a later point in time.
Great. Thank you for
We
explaining that.
have somebody coming to a future meeting to speak with us about issues like that. I'm by no means an expert in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's part one of the recommendation. Part two is to commission the Facilities Advisory Committee to consider the future of SVLC and Weston High School facilities. This speaks to Sherry's question because every time I speak about this to a group, I get different ideas from people. I really appreciate that. But we need to magnify that who's going to be adding their voice in to help us get a better picture, a bigger picture, a complete picture. The reason that I'm recommending this to the committee, I recommended this to the committee because there were questions about the future of SVLC in Weston that we could not answer. And you'll see, I'm going to show you another document in a few minutes that talks about funding improvements to SVLC, but there are only so many improvements that we can make to a series of portable buildings. We cannot provide a commons facility for that site. It's difficult for us to provide adequate number of toilets. We've got 200 kids potentially on that site at one time with only 3 toilets for the whole place for students. So there are some serious issues here that we need to address and find ways to resolve. And we did not simply have enough time over the past year to consider those issues, and they merit more discussion and exploration. The same can be said for Weston High School. It's a little different in terms of complexity of the problem there. The building, again, is aging. It started its life as a telephone manufacturing facility. When we acquired it, we remodeled it to suit our needs, but that doesn't change the very nature of the building itself. It's aging. There's equipment in there that is due for replacement that is very expensive. And we want to make sure that when we consider this in the context that the building is leased, and if our lease were to end, we would abandon the building and all the improvements we make to it. Is that the best use of our funds available to us to make those improvements to a space that we may have to leave at some point?
Do we own that property?
We do not own that property. We lease the property and the building. We're responsible for maintaining it, keeping it up. And we're also, we're doing the right thing by keeping it safe for students and staff and the community. But we need to understand that every dollar we put into that building, we don't get to keep it. Yes.
And who is the owner of that land?
That's the Arlington Airport. So it's the city of Arlington that owns the land. And if you've been in the area recently, you might have noticed the sun blocking structure directly to the south of it. And that's just the way of the future for that place. There's the 40 acres to the north of it is also being developed for industrial purposes. So that area is being surrounded by industrial structures, which is appropriate for a telephone manufacturing company. Is it appropriate for a high school? That's the question that we need to address. So maybe there's some opportunity here to provide a new home for SVLC and Weston, maybe even together. And I've also been reminded that the SVLC includes the ECAP Apple Preschool as well. So these are 3 entities, 3 programs that we operate that we need to formulate questions about and determine what the best path forward for us is. That's why this recommendation is included here. Okay, part 3. In the same vein as submitting a ballot question for post, we're recommending submitting a ballot question to voters requesting funding for the community to accomplish projects identified in the master facilities plan. At this point, None of these options that you're gonna see presented here include any project associated with post middle school. Because there's an assumption that the bond is gonna pass, we won't have to deal with the problems of post middle school. I don't want you to think that we don't have any problems with the building. The cost estimate associated with fixing the problems in that building, by May or in May of 2027 is $43 million. So that's not a small thing. In addition to that cost, the costs that are not included in fixing the issues of post middle school include finding a home for the students that are currently in post middle school while those repairs take place. This could mean something like building a portable farm on the site. That's what they call it in the industry. That's what they call it, a series of portables connected to provide a facility while another facility is being repaired or rebuilt. And that would, we haven't studied the cost of that, what that would mean. Or we could double shift with another school building and operate post in an existing building in parallel with that building, but it would have to be at a different time. So post is a different animal all to itself. Now, if post is, if the post bond is not approved, then there are other decisions that will need to be made following that. Do we continue to request funding to replace post? Do we ask for a capital levy to make the improvements in post, which will be easier to pass because of the passage thresholds, but it comes with its own set of problems and it still doesn't provide a building with interior hallways. Yes.
Can you just remind me how much is a portable and how many portables would we need if we had to house all of post students
So we
in
have 2
portables?
classrooms per portable. Yes, we got 40 classrooms, so we need 20 portables. Plus a series of portables for support functions like admin offices, counseling offices. That doesn't address gym. Because there are problems with the gym that need to be addressed as well.
Yeah, it would be in the past, the high school that's on Front Street here, they had to do double shifting. And so the likelihood that either, even now if the outdated and like the 22 heat pumps that we have, if something would happen that we could not function, we would consider the double shifting. So
Yes.
either, at some point, which is not ideal at all.
And what is double shifting? What is that?
When Arlington High School ran a double shift back in 2002, I think. 2000. Part of the school would attend starting at 7 a.m. and they would dismiss at 1 p.m. And then another part of the school would start at 10 a.m. and they would dismiss at 4 p.m. So you don't have all the kids in the building at one time. Or starting at least, and then depending on scheduling, it would influence how many students you could have in the building at one time. Basically, you would have 2 schools operating out of the same building during different times.
Or if the voters were to approve a bond, then the students would, as long as the post was able to house that during the rebuild, the building of a whole new post, they would stay in that building until the new post was totally finished.
That's correct. There'd be no displacement. The students operations would not move into the new building until it was completed. They would stay in place. So it's definitely the least disruptive method of providing placement or making the building be able to support educational services. So just want to be clear that this part 3, which is really a recommendation for a capital levy, a renewal of the capital levy that we've got right now, does not include any projects associated with post middle school. So I'm going to go over the 3 options now. Before I do that, I wanted to show you another document that was shared as part of the agenda. And these are more detailed look at, oh, I'll make this bigger too.
Thank you.
More detailed look at each site and the projects that would be covered under the urgent critical systems option, the urgent building only option, and the all urgent projects. So the distinction between, and you'll see this when I get into the slide deck again. Urgent critical systems are just buildings or parts of the building that are need the attention most quickly. Urgent building system that can include things that are smaller items that we may be able to find a way around funding, but there's no guarantee that we can get there. But they're still pretty important. You can see, for example, water heaters at Arlington High School. There's several water heaters there. The most critical systems include the roof at Arlington High School. It needs to be replaced. We discovered this last year during the process of constructing the addition at Arlington High School. We started doing a more in-depth look at the roof there. It's approaching 20 years of age. Some of the warranty items, they're outdated. You can't get any warranty relief from them any longer. There are some ventilation issues and some leak issues happening in that roof. The advice of our roofing consultant is that we replace that roof. That's an example. So each one of these options that I'm about to show you, the detail for the projects are included inside of this this spreadsheet that came along with the board agenda item.
Brian, can I ask you a
Yes.
question? Are they in any particular order? Is it just alphabetical or it's not like priorities at the top of the list?
I tend to structure this by high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and then multi-grade span school buildings like SVSC. So there's no priority expressed at all, except in the columns to the right. So you can see, we'll go down to SVLC. So SVLC projects that were identified as black portables need re-roofing, need some repairs to siding on those portables. Needs to be painted. Rebuild the toilet room that we've got there. Replace the ramps. This is an issue the Director Ray brought up earlier this year. There's wooden ramps out there right now.
And the students. brought this up.
The students did too, yes.
And the student voices.
The wooden ramps are less expensive, but they're also prone to failure over time. So we replace those with aluminum ramps. They're much sturdier and don't require the same kind of maintenance. Heat pumps at the portables. Stormwater systems there, other standing water on the ground needs to be addressed. So you can see a real key distinction between option 1 and 2 and option 3 is that there's no paving included with option 1 and 2. It's all either inside the building or it's got an effect to the building itself, like getting water away from the building. And then option 3 includes some paving projects. Paving is super expensive. Yeah, I'm going to proceed with the slide presentation. So that's just an example, meant to be an example of the detailed workbook. Option 1, funding for the most urgent of building only projects to protect life safety, preserve structural integrity, and replace some building critical systems like internet infrastructure. We are so dependent on access to the internet and the internet infrastructure, which is basically the cabling inside of the building, is outdated and cannot support internet that is being demanded at the speed that's being demanded now. So the estimated cost of this is $16.53 million for option one. Option two includes all the items above, plus replacing wall and floor covering system. Got some bathroom floors where the tile is cracked. It's still functioning, but it should be replaced. We've got floor covering or wall coverings, and for example, at Eagle Creek, that need to be replaced. They've got rips in them. It's not the kind of stuff that we can repair because it's, and I would say it's an archaic design. But there are better products out there now that we can use to replace it, and they're expensive. So the estimated cost on that is $17.9 million. Then option three, which has a lot of paving work involved, and this is not unsubstantial work. This is not just to make it look pretty. This is to make it safe for people to travel on it. Prime example I can give you is Haller Middle School. Parking lot at Haller Middle School is large and failing in several places or non-existent. It was never installed. The same thing, we find the same conditions at other schools, including Eagle Creek, Kent Gray, excuse me, Pioneer, even Arlington High School has some paving issues that need to be addressed. So the estimated cost of that is $26.2 million. So what we're recommending is that the board select an option package from one of these three. So next steps, and this date is going to change September 25th. I just heard back from DA Davidson today. They cannot make September 25th. We need to reschedule this time. But we'll get a presentation from DA Davidson on property tax related matters. It's a very comprehensive presentation. We received part of it earlier this year in the Facilities Advisory Committee, but now we'll be able to fill in the gaps that we're missing. Like, what are the tax ramifications of a bond issue of the size that we're contemplating, as well as the taxes associated with the capital levy packages that I presented and over a 4-year period. And there's general levy related information that we presented in there as well. We'll also include some information regarding the EP&O levy and what our current position is in the county as far as the tax rates that we've got in place. So following that, October 9th, following feedback from the board, we'll present a refined facilities request in addition to EP&O related information. And really, this is going to be information presented about draft resolutions that the board may be considering later on in the school year. And then on November 13th, we'll have hopefully have a decision package ready for you to make a decision about placing questions on the 2024 ballot. Board has until November 15th to adopt resolutions. We're having that decision point available sooner than that.
Or December, do you mean December 15th?
Yes, December 15th. What did I say?
November 15th.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, December 15th.
I didn't want them to think they have 2 days.
So this is a lot. We'll have time to talk about this at future workshops and board meetings. Be glad to answer any questions for you, but I can't. Yes, sir.
Slightly related or off topic. Don't we still own a tax parcel off of Highway 530?
Yes, we do.
Aren't you still trying to sell it?
Yes, we are.
And would the proceeds of that sale go into your capital fund?
Yes, they
And
will.
would could that be applied towards some of these
It
projects?
sure could.
So, so are we being aggressive on that or?
Well, it's not up to us. It's up to the county permitting authority.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So the sale is contingent upon the issuance of a surface mining permit from Snohomish County. They have that application. In fact, the buyer, Miles Sand and Gravel, they had to pull their prior application and submit a new one because there were some issues with traffic, access to Highway 530 that they needed to reconsider. And that they're addressing responses to those questions now with their new package. They do have a total of 6 years in order to complete the sale. Otherwise, they lose their earnest money. And we're coming up on another anniversary here in November. We have 5 years. So we've got another year after this.
Good question.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So Brent, if I understand what you were explaining, the total dollar amount of all the things that you looked at with the facility advisory committee is 90 million. But you bring us 3 options, one for 16 million, one for 17 million, one for 26 million.
Yes,
Did I understand that correctly?
yes,
All right, so we're still kind of ignoring some of the problem by not addressing all the things on that
yes,
list.
yes, we are.
And that's for the capital levy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
is there any other way that we can pay for some of these building updates, repairs, maintenance with our regular general fund, or does it all have to be?
It doesn't have to be. So we could include a request in the EP&O levy for building related issues and make transfers of that into the capital projects fund when we receive the funds. We could also do a non-voted debt borrowing. That's very limited because we have to repay that from a source other than property taxes. And so we would have to have some other resource available to support that repayment. In this, in the current situation that we're in right now with the capital levy, we were able to do a non-voted borrowing. But the interest on that, when I say repay with property taxes, taxes have to be pledged to repay it. Or included in the resolution that considers the actual levy itself. Or we have to have another resource in the current levy. The other resource we had was timber money. We completed a timber sale before we put the issue on the ballot. We were able to use that money to pay the interest on the non-voted debt loan. It's going to be a while before we have another timber sale that we can take advantage of.
20 years, 50 years?
I'd say at least another 5 years from now.
Personally, I feel that we should focus on improving things that impact student learning on properties that we own. And when we don't own it, I don't feel like we should be investing as much into that area. That's just my personal opinion.
That's why I'm making a recommendation that we conduct a study about what the future of that program is going to be. And I'm by no means suggesting that we end the program. What I am suggesting is that we determine where do we want to put our resources? Do we want to put them in continuing to improve the building that we may not be able to occupy in the future? There's no indicators that we're going to lose access to that property. But there is, we should expect increases in the cost of that property just to occupy it to continue. Because the county the city by law has to do an assessment every year as to the value of that property and adjust our lease payment based on that assessment. With all the industrial property going up around it, it's going to continue to rise. Industrial commercial property is worth a lot more than residential property is. So I think it's prudent for us to expect that property cost of occupying the building itself is going to continue to increase. So I agree with you. I think it would be ideal for us to have a building that we own that nobody can raise the price on it for us.
Director Kelly, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I think that was a great suggestion, though, Mary. I kind of agree with you. It's invest in what we own, and certainly many facets to consider. So I'm interested to hear what our the bond conversation will be about. So that will add to our discussion in the future. Thank you.
Director Nat, any questions or comments?
No questions. Thanks, Brian, for all the information, and like Sherry, I'm curious what these ballot questions will produce as far as answers from the community.
Director Kingman, any more? questions? And our student advisors, any thoughts about buildings and?
Yeah, I have a quick question, actually. So regarding the questions or the options you proposed just tonight, what did some of the timelines look on those?
So great question. So if we were to receive support from the community, then the money from that tax levy, from the capital levy, at least. So the bond and the capital are two different issues. Bonds we could sell right away. Theoretically, we could begin receiving bond funds in July of 24. Capital levy, because its timing would be from 2025, and I'm being presumptuous here that we would do a 4-year levy through 2029, then we would not receive our first collection until 2025, until the spring of 2025. And again, it's somewhat the opposite of how we operated the last capital levy, and that we'll have to wait for levy funds to accrue before we can start working on a project. So that for example, that re-roof of Arlington High School, we would have probably 1.5 years before we could start working on replacing the roofing at Arlington High School. Because that's how long it would take for us to collect the $5 million necessary.
Yeah, and for example, for the re-roofing, how long would that take?
We could do that in the summer. Yeah. That's very quick work. It's not terribly
The
complicated.
work itself isn't fast, but it's just the.
Fingers crossed. You know, you can never tell what you're going to encounter when you start pulling the thing, the building apart. But ideally, we would be done in the summer.
Great question.
Yes.
Student Advisor Nichols, any more questions? Student Advisor LeBon, any questions about the building project?
No, I don't think I have any questions.
Great. Well, I think we look forward to hearing more from you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next step is our first reading of board policies 4060, distribution of materials, and 4210, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises. I'd like to welcome Gary Sable.
Hello, good evening, directors. The one I'm going to be talking about, I guess Brian's talking about the other one, but the one I'm talking about is 4060 distribution of materials. And you'll see a lot of it is wording changes we get from the Washington State School Directors Association. We get kind of best practices. They review these things. And these are the recommendations. A lot of it has to do with just wording changes, but there's also a recognition that a lot of districts are transitioning from hard copy paper to electronic flyers and other materials. And so in our district, we use Peachjar. If you're a family member or staff, you've probably seen these in the past. But yeah, so this is kind of a lot of cleanup for this policy, and that's what it addresses. Any questions?
Does it change anything about your current practice?
No, it does not. And the practice is they have to be from a nonprofit organization. We don't allow for-profit organizations to submit flyers to our families. So that's the practice we've had, at least since I've been here. So.
Any more questions? He's shaking his head. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to welcome Brian back to talk about the next policy, 4210.
Okay. So 4210 is board policy. The title is regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises. If you could scroll down, please.
Are there non-dangerous weapons?
That's the legislature, because they're the ones that write the law. To your question, Mike, the listing of what is considered a dangerous weapon, at least for this policy, begins under that header, dangerous weapons. And you can see the first listing is any firearm. Now there's a whole bunch of other items that are considered dangerous weapons, but nothing has changed in that regard. So I'm going to move past that into the exceptions section, And the second list of exceptions that are entitled or have A and B designators beside them. And firearms are prohibited from school property with two exceptions. Well, let me read this statement so I'm clear. The following persons who are over 18 years of age, not employed by the district, not renting or leasing district facilities, and not enrolled as students may possess firearms outside of school buildings on school property under only the following limited conditions. The first condition is someone who has a concealed weapons permit and they're picking up or dropping off students at school. That is really not a new aspect of this policy change. There's some adjustments in the wording, but they don't have a substantial effect on the meaning of the policy. The second change is the section where a meaningful effect occurs. And that's people who have a concealed weapon permit can carry that while attending official meetings of the school board held off district owned or leased property. For example, if we are having a board meeting at a facility that is not owned by the district or leased by the district, and lease is not just an occasional use for a few hours, but for an extended period of time, more than a month, then a person could carry a concealed weapon into that meeting.
So Brian, why is this change being suggested?
So this is related to legislation passed in 2022 under engrossed substitute House Bill 1630. And that bill modified RCW 9.41.280 to allow for something like this to happen.
I'm just a little curious what the intent of this change is. I just find it a little curious.
The policy news that came along with this policy change really did not provide the intent.
I think, Sherry, I think that it possibly has to do with public district, premises versus maybe we might go to a private premises where people's rights may be violated. But I will make a statement that because of this change, there'll be questions about where we will, if we were to go off site somewhere, where might that be? And if there's a situation in that timeline where we're concerned about safety, we may just stay on campus.
Right. Yeah, I would like maybe to do my own deep dive on, I can understand a bit of the implications and I understand people's rights. I'm just curious. I'm just curious about the intention of having this policy that if it's off district property, a person with a permit can have a concealed carry weapon. And I just find that interesting that someone would even want to do that going to a meeting regarding school business. I will just look into it myself as my curiosity. But I understand we're obligated to respect the RCW. So just interesting on my part. Thank you.
I think Chris is right. I think it is a First Amendment issue.
Yeah, and it changed a bit because there was a time in like the last year that we were required to post when we went off site to post a notice that, weapons weren't allowed, just like on a school site. But I think legislation, there was something happened, where this changed. So when we got this new language from WASDA, we too were kind of wondering, we were questioning it as well. But yes, it's here with us.
So this is first reading. Well,
Does anyone have any questions or suggested changes for this policy or the one before it? Hearing no suggestions for changes, I want to say thank you, Brian, for joining us this evening and sharing. Next up, we'll have our informational items. We'll start with our superintendent's report. Dr. Sweeting.
I would like to share that this last week, the district leadership team met for 2 days to engage in what we do to set the stage for the start of the new school year. And we engaged in learning and understanding that really focused on the universal design for learning and belonging and learning together. How are those two connected? So we spent the time doing that. We also spent time doing a data carousel, which what that was is we had numerous data sets around the room, and we went and we analyzed the data sets, and the board will have an opportunity to do the same next Monday during the all-day workshop. So you will actually engage in the same analysis that the district leaders did, and asking questions. What do you notice? And what are some questions that you have? So that it was a good time with the leaders. I felt like we have new individuals that have joined us, and it was a good way to come together as a team and be focused and really identify again and reground ourselves in what our priorities is student learning and achievement and removing barriers and increasing access to that. And so I was going to share that next Monday is our all-day workshop upstairs in the Lincoln Room for the board. And it'll start at 9 o'clock, and you'll have a preview. We're going to engage in the data carousel. We're also going to do an analysis of the board self-assessment results and determine goals for the next year in a professional development plan. So those are the focuses for next Monday. And then I wanted to thank a team that included Gary Sable and Carrie Henderson-Berg and Janelle Sable and various principals for coming on Saturday to Presidents, because the Volunteers for America, they had a community resource fair, and we had many students that came. And there was backpacks filled with supplies that were given out. There was activities. Gary had a remote control bus that the kids, a little remote control bus that they could maneuver through little cones. And anyway, I just want to thank the team for doing that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. That was fun. I want to play with the bus. Can that be part of our board workshop? That's great. Next up, we have our legislative update discussion. Director Kelly.
So July was quiet. I have my next ledge rep meeting on August 29th. So it'll be after our next board meeting. And that'll just be prepping for what we have in September, which will be the WASDA General Assembly. So just looking forward to getting that. I will have probably at the board meeting on, gosh, that won't be until, I'm not sure, whatever our board meeting will be in early September. I will be bringing that forward just to remind everybody, probably our top 10. And if you just are thinking about that now, any thoughts you have of what you really want to see. I don't know that you have copies of what we did last year, but I will be getting that, and yeah, looking forward to lively discussion. It's always good to see what we put forward, because if we have our issues that are consistent, but if there's something striking or something we really want to tweak that has been a general issue we want to put forward, let's hone that a bit and say, this is what Arlington, these are, and I know we have board members, but I asked this of Dr. Sweeting to please reach out to our staffing and let me know, special ed, career and technical education. I want to hear from our constituent community of educators and support personnel to tell me what they want to see that we're going to take to our legislators. I mean, I have my set, and we're board members, we're parents, but I want to see from our school community what's really important to us, and obviously safety in numbers, right? So if we're bringing these issues forward, and we have many other people in various districts in our state, then we'll have a larger, louder voice. So. Yeah, I had a sort of a social greeting with our, one of my favorite reps is Clyde Shavers, and we met with him a couple weeks ago because just kind of a government nerd, and I went to Olympia with my daughter and just touching base with him. My daughter's going to meet with Dave Paul, our other rep, about supermajority and where he stands on that. our third representative, Ron Muzal in Oak Harbor, stands firmly behind supermajority. So, just getting the lay of the land. And I think that would, I understand when Brian presents these numbers, how absolutely critical it is. And we are not alone in the critical nature of the needs of our students and our staff. But it just, that price tag keeps getting higher. And carpe diem, I want to seize whatever we can get now. And I feel energized to help support that ask in the spring, because I just don't see what we're going to do if we don't get it. So I'm really passionate about helping to move that forward. So anyway, I know we have legislators to support that, but as we get ready for General Assembly, like I said, just please provide me with that. So when I attend that, we can make sure that that's one of our WASDA's priorities. So that's it. Having fun in Pittsburgh.
You. Thanks for zooming in at whatever time it is in Pittsburgh.
Oh, not as late as Erica, but I'm going on 11 o'clock.
Next up, we have our comments from board members. Director Knapp, do you have any comments?
Yeah, welcome to Nathan and congratulations. I guess I'll find out if you would rather be called Nate or Nathan. We'll sit next to each other. And I am really grateful for Zoom and for this technology, even though we had trouble at the beginning. Because I can wake up in the middle of the night while my family is sleeping and join a board meeting and go on with the day. So just a personal note, technically today is my 11-year-old's birthday, so I'm living in tomorrow. So we're gonna go see some castles today and eat ice cream and pizza. So I'll see y'all when I get back.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being with us, both of you world travelers. Director Kingman, anything you'd like to share tonight?
We have all day training on Monday.
Correct.
Anyway, we can start it at 6 o'clock in the morning instead of 9. Or do you all sleep in late?
No, she's awake.
No, I'll be ready at 6 though.
Okay, good. You want to go for a run?
Sure.
Okay. Student advisor Levon, would you like to share anything? Are you excited to be a senior?
It honestly has snuck up on me. Like I'm just like reminiscing all the times when I was an underclassman saying, oh, I wish I was a senior. And now it's here and I'm like, I wish I was a sophomore. I need my years back. But I'm very excited for this next year. I think it's going to be a great one. I myself will not be up at 6 a.m. on Monday, but I will be here at 9. I don't think I have anything else to add. I hope everybody has a great end to their summer. I hope they had a fantastic summer this year. It was a good one for me, at least. And yeah, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday.
Thank you. So, Student Advisor Nichols, this is your time to share any thoughts or concerns or anything you wanted to know.
Oh, I have so many thoughts and concerns.
We would love them.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the warm welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you and your time. I am very excited to, I guess, learn what this position entails for me and how I can better our community and what ideas I can present to you guys and it would be helpful in some cases, I guess. But to answer your question, Erica, I like Nathan. Nathan suits me well. But yeah, I don't have too many, I guess I lied to you guys. I don't have too many concerns right now.
All right.
But I'm very thankful for this opportunity and I'm looking forward to learning and growing with you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate all of our voices that we can learn from and make this school district a better place for everyone. We appreciate it. I wanted to remind everybody about, I think everybody knows that next Monday, right here in the district office, we'll have our all-day workshop starting at 9 a.m. And then the following week on August 28th, we will have a regular board meeting at 6 p.m. right here in the boardroom. If there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Madam Clerk. I sorry, we went so fast. We were like, ooh, we could leave you. Director Kelly.
I,
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Nat.
Hi.
Meeting is adjourned. Travel safely. See you next time.